are the days that link these two Yom Tovim together. And it would really be a time of rejoicing when you know that you have a period in between two very fundamental Yom Tovim. And it's referred to sometimes as Chol Hamoed, because don't forget, Shavuos has no date. Every other holiday has a date. For example, Rosh Hashanah is the first day of Tishrei. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. Sukkot, it says the 15th day of Tishrei. Every holiday has a date. Doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that you have to celebrate Shavuos on a certain day, like the 6th day of Sivan. So when do we celebrate? It all depends when Pesach is. We start from Pesach. The 50th day from the counting of the Omer, which begins second day of Pesach, that's when your Shavuos is. So Shavuos really is not a holiday of its own. It's like the finale. You mentioned, I think, 2 weeks ago. It's the finale. It's the purpose and the goal and the objective of the liberation from servitude, becoming a free people. Because unless you have a purpose, unless you have a goal, unless you have responsibility, you can go right back to prison again. You see many prisoners, when they leave prison, since they had a problem in their moral ethics, which is the reason why they went into prison in the first place, we find that it doesn't take a long time after, they go right back into prison. They start violating again, committing the same crimes. And even if they don't go back to prison, they're morally still, flawed, because they have no goal. They weren't taught anything. They were just punished, and that's it. So the purpose of the counting of a sphera is to let us understand that our liberation is not just free, do what you want. It's for a goal and a goal of following the orders of a supreme being. It's interesting when Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Hashem, he was saying to Hashem, how am I going to redeem them? They're not worthy. It's kind of strange that Moshe should say this. The Jews are not worthy with what? With what? What are they leaving with? They've been in servitude, they've been in Gullus for so long, and they have a Gullus mentality. How are going to, it's not going to help. They're going to go right back into, if not Egypt, another country, or they'll be slaves and morally slaves. How am I going to, why would I want to liberate a people when it's not going to be a successful liberation? They're going to go right back into servitude, one way or another. So Hashem says, don't worry, I'm going to give them the Torah. So Moshe wasn't saying they're not worthy. He was saying, what's the purpose of my liberating them when they're going to go right back in? Because normally when you ask what's the worthiness, why do you think you're worthy of being rewarded? The answer can't be because in the future there's going to be something. You're going to be a good boy in the future, a good girl in the future. It has to be based on the past. So why did Hashem say to Moshe, well, there's going to be giving, the Torah will be given? The answer is Moshe wasn't doubting their schus. What Moshe Rabbeinu was doing is he was saying, I definitely want to liberate them, but how am I going to be sure, guarantee that they won't go right back into that Egyptian culture and ideology and mentality? And that Hashem responded, don't worry, I'm going to give them something very special, and that's the Torah. This week's Sphira, just want to talk about a little bit about the week we're in right now. We're in the 6th week, which Midah is that? Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Yisod. That's a hard meaning to figure out what that means. Translated as bonding. Literally it means foundation. What is it? So what it means is when you bond with something or someone. This is the whole class, by the way. This is keeps shrinking. This is the entire class. No one knows about anyone else. So the Midah of Yesod is a complicated Midah. It's in the center. You know what I mean by the center? There's right, left, and center in the 10 spheros. There's Chachma, Chesed, Netzach, Bina, Gvura, Hod, and there's Das, Tes, and Yesod. All the center Midas are connectors. Are connected. For example, Das. What is Das? Das is when you get Chachma is when something's flashing in your mind. It's not part of you. It's far from it. You get this flash. Light turns on, and then you lose it. It's like it's a flash. Something went right, but you don't know what it is yet. Bina is when you start really analyzing, dissecting, and you begin to understand. It's not just floating around your mind. It's becoming clear, but it's not relatable. Like I can understand a lot of things, but I don't shake my head. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can feel it. Das is when you not just understand it, but you know it. Das is knowledge. I know it like I know myself. I can relate to it. So up here, in fact, it says Das. Where's the membrane of Das? It's in the back of the person's head. I don't know how it fits with science today, but there's the right side of the head is the where Chachma resides. Left side is where Bina resides, and then back in the middle is connected to the membrane, whether it's called the cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem. I'm not going to go into that, but it's in the back side at the center of the head and the back, connected to the spine. That's where the moyach hadas, the moyach, the membrane, which gives you the ability to not just understand something, but relate to it. We use das when it comes to Adam and Chava. It says Adam knew Chava. He knew her. Well, you saw her on Facebook. What do you mean he knew her? Intimacy. So we see that das is used for intimacy, which is the closest connection you could possibly have to another person. Adam yada es Chava. So das is hiskashrus, but it's an intellectual hiskashrus. Then there is tiferes. Tiferes, what das is to the brain, tiferes is to the heart. It's a middle, it's a center, a midah that's not one-sided either to the right or to the left. Like some people are very naturally they inclined to be kind and see the good in everyone, and there are people who always see the negativity in other people, and they might be right. They can both be right. One sees the cup half full, one sees the cup half empty, and the middle one is. I don't look at what you're looking at. You're looking at the surface. The person who has tiferes is able to transcend the view of either of those two. And that's why a person who has tiferes is able to be very seemingly inconsistent. Meaning not inconsistent, unpredictable. Because whatever the truth demands, that's how I feel. If I feel that for your sake, for the betterment of your sake, it's not to give you a gift, I understand chesed. I feel I see what you I could also see what chesed sees, but I begin to believe, but I can see deeper. Not right now. Now is not the time, or vice versa. Gvura, I see your point. I can see the faults of this person, but you have to look deeper. Have compassion. The person needs it, even though the person doesn't deserve it. Give anyways. So Tiferes is very, in the center. It doesn't see. It doesn't see one way or another. It sees both ways. It could connect the two opposite extremes. I mentioned that when it comes to a rabbi who gives a ruling, some rabbis are very predictable. They're always strict, or they're always lenient. Then there's a rabbi who's very strict over here and very lenient over here. It all depends on the situation. There's no nature that leads me to a ruling. It's whatever the situation demands. That's how I see things. I go to the core and see things. But Tiferes is also, compassion is one of the translations of Tiferes. What's Yesod? Yesod is also a midah that does binding, but it's not in the brain, not in the heart. It's related to action in a way. When you bond with someone, of course, a mother always bonds with her baby when the baby is born. Ask any mother how she feels in the moment she sees her baby for the first time. So it's a very pleasant feeling that can't be expressed. It's not love. It's more than love. It's a connection where they're bonding with each other. It's hard to put into words. It's actually the foundation of all the other midas. It's called foundation. Yesod means a foundation. Because without Yesod, all your other midas are going to fall apart. It's not going to last. For a person to have a lasting midah, whatever midah it is, strong midah, either strong in chesed or strong in vura, whatever midah it is, the foundation of being able to feel something on a permanent level, not on a, here today and gone tomorrow, is the midah of Yesod, is the power to bond and to connect. So Yiddishkeit would mean a Jew who really relates to Yiddishkeit, someone who has this warm connection to what Hashem wants. It's like its natural cup of tea. I don't need any reason. I relate to it. And a person bonds like a soldier. A soldier in the army doesn't have any difficulty. He's so programmed to do whatever the general, the commander tells him, that he does it automatically. There's a bond between the soldier and his commander. But that could also be very dry and not so beautiful. Like sometimes you see a person who, whatever is told, he just does. That sounds robotic. Sounds like, doesn't, it's beautiful in a way that the person is so given over and like he doesn't have to even think and does whatever is right. But it's sort of lifeless in a way. It's robotic. Like, are you a robot? Don't you have a mind of your own? So that's why you have all the other Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Just give an example. Tiferes of Yesod would mean that your Yesod, your Bittul, your Hiskashrus is beautiful. It's pleasant to look at. You're a normal person with a brain of your own, and in spite of the fact of being a person of authority, a person of integrity, you still have this natural tendency to connect to Yiddishkeit, just like an old Bubba, an alter Bubba, an old grandmother, simple belief. They say about the Rebbe. Someone, I think Rabbi Soloveitchik described the Rebbe's greatness, mind, and yet his emunah in Hashem is like an old grandmother, simplicity, a simple and deep at the same time. That's beautiful. For a person to have Yesod, this bonding, this like you're part of something, you can't live without it. You think about it 24/7, 365. You're bound to this person. We connect very much with the Rebbe as the person that we love very much, and we every chassid thinks, how can I make the Rebbe happy? How can I? The greatest nachas any chassid would have is cause the Rebbe to smile. It would be when the Rebbe says, you gave me nachas ruach, wow. So, but a beautiful hiskashrus would be when a person feels, when the hiskashrus does not cause you to look down at other people. Sometimes when a person is first of all, when you're a robot, it looks like you don't look human. When there's too much subservience. Some can feel you don't have a mind of your own, so it feels a little, it doesn't feel so normal. Again, is when the midah yesod is harmonized, perfect balance. Yes, you are a person, you're a thinker, you have integrity, you're nice to people. You don't act like some kind of zombie that no one can talk to you because you're buttle and you're connected. Your hiskashrus is not at the expense of being normal. It's beautiful. Today is Hod to be a Sod. Hod to be a Sod with me. Hod is humility. Same idea. That you're a humble person. Your bonding is humble. You're not putting people down who don't have your level of hiskashrus. You don't look down at people because they're not on your level. And you're humble. You said, what's the big deal? I mean, how else could it be? I don't think much of myself. And you respect other people who don't have your feelings. That's Hod to be a Sod, to be on the level of being a soldier of Hashem, and yet those who are not yet on your level, not soldiers, you still feel humble even towards them. So that would be an example of Hod to be a Sod. Okay. I want to just ask a couple questions. I want to go right to the recording. I'm going to play a recording of my brother, a 40-minute, apologizing for that. I hope you listen. It's a very interesting lecture he gives in Buffalo. There's some humorous parts, but most of it is it's good. A lot of information. Some of it we actually discussed over the last few months. I mentioned a few things that he's going to talk about much more clear than I can be. You'll see he speaks slower than I do, and he's very clear. Before I get to that, I want to ask you a question. What is the reason, why is the holiday of Shavuos called Shavuos? The holiday of weeks. Anyone know? What's the simple answer to that question? Why is it called the holiday of weeks? The one-day holiday, or 2 days if you're living in Chutz La'aretz. Why is it called the holiday of weeks?
Because of the weeks that we spend counting.
Right, because there is the same answer because we count weeks. There's a weekly counting to get up to Shavuos. We count 7 weeks. So because the holiday is preceded by a 7-week count, therefore we call it the holiday of weeks. A little strange. Because if that's the case, we could call the holiday of days. We actually count 49 days, don't we? So why do we focus on the weeks more than the days? There's 49 days. Call it the holiday of days. Chag HaYomim by Chag HaShavuos. So one of the answers is there's a reason why it's referred to as the holiday of weeks, because the 7 weeks of us counting before we are married to Hashem, there's a marriage going on. Matan Torah is a marriage. Before we're able to have this bonding with Hashem, this marriage, Chas and Kala, we count 7. Just like a woman wants to be reunited with her husband, goes through a period of menstrual cycle, and then she has to count 7 days. After she no longer sees any blood, she has to count 7 clean days, 7 days of no blood, and then she's able to go to the mikveh. So just like a woman, husband-wife relationship takes place after a 7-day count, Hashem, who's the husband, and we are the wives, is a 7-week count. 7 weeks, 7 days. Another answer is given why we focus on the weeks is because to remind us that Shavuos, although it's a 1-day holiday, is actually a whole week holiday. How is it a whole week? Well, we don't say Tachanun for a whole week after Shavuos. What's that? What's the reason for that? Because when we had the Beis Hamikdash, if you fail to bring a korban, your sacrifice, on the actual holiday, you could make it up after the holiday, which is a very novel law, that you're able to make up something you had to do on the holiday after the holiday is over. If you make it up, you think it would still be part of inside the holiday. But there's no Chol HaMoed Shavuos. We don't have a Chol HaMoed on Shavuos. You have only 1 day or 2 days, and you can still make it up for a whole week. So to a certain extent, the Yom Tov of Shavuos is also a week. So to remind us of that, we call the holiday of weeks. Weeks that lead to the holiday, but it's also really extended for a week. I mentioned this last year, but I have another reason why it's called Chag HaShavuos. And this is, you could take it or leave it. It doesn't have any authenticity to it. But I thought to myself something very interesting. Every segment of time is understandable why that's what it consists. For example, a day is 24 hours. Why is a day 24 hours? A day is 24 hours because has to do with the sun. Why is a month 30 days? Because the moon. That's the moon makes a cycle of 30 days. Why is a year 365 days? Also understandable. But why is a week 7 days? Why is a week 7 days? In fact, and even the non-Jews tried it and it never worked. Everyone accepts universally, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a believer, this religion, that religion, everyone believes there's a 7-day week. What's the answer? Because the Torah says so. In the Torah it says, gracious world came, God created the world, and it was in 7 days. So here's the Yom Tov that makes a week 7 days. It's Chag the Yom Tov. Thanks to this Yom Tov, a week is not 8 days or 6 days, it's 7 days. Because the Torah that was given on Shavuos talks about creation, which had a 6 days Hashem created the world, the 7th day he rested. And whether you understand it or not, subconsciously or consciously or subconsciously, you accept it. It's a Chag, a Yom Tov, that made a week to be 7 days, not 1 day less or 1 day more. Okay, another answer. So that's why it's called Chag HaShavuos. The Chag that decided the size, the length of a week. Or another answer as to why it's called Chag HaShavuos. Actually, that was not mine. That was my friend of mine gave me the answer I just gave you. My answer was days. Every day has a different number, a different name. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. In Hebrew, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, Domingo, Lunes, Marte, Mercules, Jueves, Viernes, Sábado. Every day has a different name. But every month has a different name. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, January, February, March. Every year is a different number. 2026, Tafshin Pei Vav. Last year was Tafshin Pei Hey. Change the name, change the number. It's novel. Never happened before. There was never 2026 before. Okay, we have different, but the months change, the years change, the days change, the weeks change. How do you differentiate one week from another week? We have a different name for a different week. Yes, we do. If you're Jewish and you believe in the Torah, Parshas Hashavua. Ah, so where do we have this whole idea of Parshas? Where was this idea of that a week is not monotonous? Well, we have every week a new flavor, Matan Torah, Parshas Hashavua. So it's the Chag that turned the seemingly monotonous idea of a week into something new. Chag, it turned a Shavua, a week, which is boring, into something that's celebratory. Chag. We celebrate. Wow, a new week, a new week, a new parsha, a new parsha. The Goyim don't have that. They don't have Parsha Shavua. And if you say Chitas, you really feel it even more. And by the way, what's the connection between Chitas and Shavuos? Look at me like that. The connection between Chitas and Shavuos is Chumash, Moshe Rabbeinu, Tehillim, David HaMelech, who passed away and was born on Shavuos, and Tanya, which is, of course, based on the Baal Shem Tov, who also passed away on Shavuos. So Chumash, Tehillim, Tanya are all connected to the holiday of Shavuos. Rabbi has a whole slicha where he discusses these three great tzaddikim, how they're actually not just great tzaddikim, there are a lot of other great tzaddikim, but they are pioneers in whatever they were represented. Moshe was the first Rebbe, first king ever. David was the first king from Malchus Yehuda, and Shem Tov was the first Rebbe of the dynasty of Hasidim. So they're pioneers in their field, not just great tzaddikim. But that's another sikh, another talk for another time. Okay, I want to mention something. I'm going to play my brother's recording of his lecture in Buffalo.
Yeah, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So what's two?
Has more than two names.
Why?
Different aspects. It's called Shavuos. It's called Ma'amatan Torasenu. It's called Aseret. Called Chag HaBikurim, Chag HaKatzir. A lot of names for different things that go on during this holiday. It has many names. I was going to ask you that question. What are the other names? But you already discussed it. So there are many names. Shavuos has many, many names. And, by the way, when I mentioned before about not getting bored from something that seems to be a do-over, same old, same old, same old, one of the reasons why we eat milchiks on Shavuos is because a baby continuously nurses from its mother, the same old milk, but always a new taste. Baby never gets bored from the same milk. So to tell us that Torah, you think, I learned this already. You learn something and you go over it again. And every time you go over something, you review what you learned, you see something new. It's like a new taste. Torah is never, it's endless. So when you review it, you're never reviewing whatever you said before, learned before, but it's also, you see new ideas, new highlights in the learning of your past learning. You see what you didn't see the first time when you learned. Likewise, with the idea of a week, that a week could normally be just a repeat, but it really is more than just that. Okay, so as I said before, the meat of his lecture is about why the Aseret HaDibros are not really 10 commandments. They're 10 declarations, 10 statements of life. That's what his lecture is about. But before it gets to the meat of his lecture, just why are they called Dibros? He has a lot of different pieces of information about the giving of the Torah. So I'll share with you in a second.
Good evening. Ready to start? Welcome to our first
You hear it?
lesson in the 10 statements of life, otherwise known as the 10 Commandments. So before we get into the difference between statements and commandments, which I think is a very fundamental difference, before that I just wanted to share some highlights about whatever you want to call it, 10 Commandments or 10 statements, which was given to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai a little over 3,200 years ago. Some of you might be old enough to remember. Actually, we're all old enough to remember because we were all there. Our souls were all there. So the 10 so-called 10 commandments were declared by God verbally. We heard the 10 commandments. And then Moses goes up on the mountain and stays there for 40 days and 40 nights and brings back the 10 commandments etched in stone, the 2 tablets. What that event that occurred at Mount Sinai then was a single most historical event, single most significant historical event in all of human history, in all of the world's existence. There's never been an event like that, and there never will be a repeat of that. There will not be a repeat of that, but as we'll soon see, that event will appear to us in greater force than ever before in the Messianic age. What was unique about that event is that there is no other tradition, no other religion, no other culture that claims that God revealed himself to an entire nation of millions of people, men, women, and children of all walks of life, of all levels of comprehension, and they all received it and accepted it. There is one culture, another culture, that does believe that their God revealed himself to population, but then they also believe that they were all killed, and there's no one survived it. So the only thing that people know is that they believe that something like that happened, but it was never an unbroken chain of testimony to it. These 10 statements, these 10 commandments, were etched on 2 stones. And contrary to the image of 10 commandments being round on the top, they were cubes. They were 2 cubes. There's much more about the cubes, but that's for another class. Where are the tablets today? So there are different opinions in the Talmud, and among archaeologists and historians, there are different opinions. But Maimonides sifted through all the opinions, and he claims that the tablets are in the ark that was built to house the tablets, and they are hidden in subterranean tunnels under the Temple Mount. So they are still there and have always been there intact. Now, since the 10 commandments or the 10 statements are considered to be so important, the question was, should it be included in our daily liturgy? And the answer the Talmud gives was no, because people would get the erroneous belief that Judaism is only based on 10 commandments, when in fact there are 613 commandments in the Torah. And if you would single out one group of commandments, people would get the notion, as did some people in the past, that that's all Judaism is about. It's about 10 commandments. And just a little bit of the comical side, there was even a debate whether when it's read in the Torah, should people stand or sit? So they tell the story about this new rabbi comes to town, and when they get ready to read the 10 commandments, half of the crowd gets up and shouts at the other half, get up, stand up. And the ones who were sitting shout to the one standing, no, sit down, you don't stand for this. So the new rabbi was dismayed by this quarrel, so he decided to ask the retired rabbi, the senior rabbi who retired, what is the custom in this synagogue? And he said, I saw half of the crowd was standing and shouting at the other half, and the other half was sitting and shouting at the one standing. What is the original custom? The old rabbi said, that is it. What's another thing unique about the 10 commandments as compared to other texts in the Torah is that it's stated in the singular, as opposed to most other places where God is addressing the whole nation, so it uses the plural. And one of the explanations given is that God wanted everyone to know that God has a personal relationship with each and every individual. We're not just part of a collective, we're not just part of a nation, of a group, but we are individually connected to God through these 10 commandments. There's another puzzling midrash that says that when God uttered the 10 commandments, there was no echo. And the question is, why would God perform a miracle like that? Who cares if there's an echo or no echo? The Rabbi once explained that the echo comes when something bounces off a surface, you get an echo. But the Torah that was given at Mount Sinai did not have an echo because it penetrated every place. It was absorbed by the whole world. The whole world, Jewish or non-Jewish, the whole world absorbed the effects of this revelation at Mount Sinai. When God said, utter the 10 commandments, the Midrash tells us that the Jewish people responded to each commandment. But there's a dispute how they responded. According to Rabbi Akiva, when God said, I am the Lord your God who's taken you out of the land of Egypt, they said, Hen, yes, we accept that. When God said, don't have any other gods, Hen, yes, we won't have any other gods. They responded in the affirmative to all the 10 statements. That's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel says no. They didn't respond the same way. If it was a positive commandment, do this, remember the Sabbath, for example, to keep it holy, they said, yes, we will. When God said, don't commit murder, they said, no, we won't commit murder. What's this dispute based on? There are two approaches, and they're both legitimate approaches to Judaism. There's one aspect of Judaism where God tells you to do something, you do it regardless of what it is. There's no difference whether it's a positive or a negative, whether it's a prescriptive or proscriptive. God says, do this, you do it. The answer is always yes, I'm ready to accept your authority. That's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And there's an element of truth in that for everyone. But then the other opinion says, no, it's not enough to just accept what God says. We're supposed to be able to relate to each individual commandment, because each commandment has another spiritual, moral, emotional, and intellectual effect. And you're supposed to focus on the differences between the commandments, that every commandment should find a resonating response in your heart and your soul. Another puzzling midrash that says that when they heard the 10 commandments, the Torah tells us that there was lightning and thunder. So according to one opinion, it's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, they saw, and it's based on the text, which is a little bit strange, they saw the sounds and they heard the sights. They heard the lightning and they saw the thunder. What exactly does that mean? Someone says that they took LSD, probably, if that was the case. But it wasn't LSD. Well, although LSD, we used to advertise this to the students at UB, come to the Chabad house for LSD. Let's start davening. And we'll give you some pot, put on fillings. It's synesthesia. When you see sounds and you hear, right. So, but what exactly? Why would God perform that miracle? God doesn't perform needless miracles. So, one explanation given by the Rebbe, based on earlier sources, is that generally speaking, what are the things that we see? Things that we see are the physical things in life. What do we hear? More the spiritual things. We hear ideas. You don't see ideas, you see physical objects. You hear ideas. And when you see something, it's much more vivid, it's much more blatant and obvious. When you hear something, someone tells you a story, you can believe the person, but you're not going to swear that it's true, and you're prepared to accept an opposite view. But when you see it with your own eyes, that tells you this is reality. So what does it mean? When before Sinai, what were the things that people were able to see vividly? The physical things. What were they able to hear about? Spiritual things. Sinai experience changed that. Physical things became distant. They were able to hear about the physical things. Yes, they knew there's a physical world, but it's something that was not vivid to them. What became vivid to them than things that are normally seen, that are normally heard, The spiritual things became so clearly to them as if they were seeing it with their eyes.
Is this not what heaven penetrates earth?
Yes. Yes. How many letters are in the Ten Commandments? There are 620 letters, and it said that they represent the 613 biblical commandments and the 7 rabbinical commandments, or alternatively, the 613 commandments that were given to the Jewish people at Sinai, plus the 7 commandments that were given to all humanity to Noah after the flood and reiterated at Sinai. So you get the number 620. And there's much more to each one of these things. We could spend a whole class in each one of these items. I just wanted to throw out some tidbits before we get into the meat.
Are there rabbinic opinions that actually the 7 Noahide laws are generalized iterations of the 613? It's not 620, but 613, and then the broader scope of that is the 7.
Well, yeah, partially true. 7 Noahide commandments are not 7.
The important part of coming up, I want you to hear. This is just
So, for example,
why they're called statements, not
steal.
Sarah said Yibrat means 10 statements, not 10 commandments. In Hebrew, it's statements.
Has a half a dozen different details. You shouldn't steal, you shouldn't withhold wages, you shouldn't defraud someone. There are so many different forms of theft. In the Noahide code, it's consolidated under one heading, but it really encompasses more than 7. So if you really want to count, it's one tradition that says there are really 30 commandments, Noahide commandments, if you go into more than specifics. So let's get to the meat of it. I sound like a broken record sometimes when I talk about the 10 statements, because the Hebrew term that's used in the Torah is aseret hadvarim, the 7 words or the 7 statements. If it would be 10 commandments, it would be aseret mitzvot, the 10 commandments. But it doesn't say that they're commandments, it says they're statements. And if you count the number of commandments actually in that body, according to Maimonides and others, there are 14 commandments. For example, one about the Sabbath is 2. Remember the Sabbath? Don't do work on the Sabbath. That's 2. The one about not worshiping idols is don't have any other gods. Don't create idols. And don't worship them and don't bow down to them. So you have more than 10 commandments in that body. So it's not 10 commandments, it's 10 statements. And actually the Greek is, if they call it Decalogue. Decalogue is closer to the truth. It means 10 declarations, 10 statements. Well, is this just semantics? No, it's not semantics. I maintain that it's much more than semantics. When you give someone a commandment, you're implying that there's a commander, there's the commandee, if there's such a word, and there's the thing that you do to forge this link between the commander and the commandee. And when you give someone a commandment, the person could say, I accept to do it, as the Jews did when they gave a response. You could say, God, thank you, but no thank you. I'm not interested. God gave us free choice. He didn't tell us you have a right to disagree, but we have the ability to disagree. When you say something is a statement, you're saying it's a declaration of fact. This is the way it is, and you can't have it any other way. What does that mean? When God created the world, he created the world with a capacity to accept and embrace what God wants or to reject it. Again, it doesn't mean we have the right to reject it, but we have the capacity, we have the ability, this free will. But what happened at Mount Sinai is a revolution in terms of what the commandments of what effect and impact it had on us. When God gave us the 10 commandments, he changed our nature. He built into our souls a resistance to anything that's not godly. At Sinai, we were given a new nature that became a natural resistance to evil. So when a person, but you see people could still do evil, that's rebellion, not just against God, it's rebelling against yourself. It's a form of temporary insanity. The Talmud says nobody transgresses, no one commits a sin unless a spirit of insanity enters into the person. In other words, sin is not just rebelling against God, it's rebelling against ourselves. From Sinai onward, the things that God wants us to do have become part of our personalities. And this reality will become manifest in the Messianic age. That's what I said before. What happened to the Ten Commandments had an effect temporarily, that people, under those influences of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, people felt, I can't do anything contrary to God's will. But then God gave us the ability with free choice to go against even our own inner self. In other words, the free choice before Sinai was free choice to accept the commandments or not accept them, to go against God or not go against God. After Sinai, it became a different kind of choice, a choice to be normal or to be crazy, to be normal or to experience temporary insanity, to rebel against ourselves. What changed at Sinai? Before Sinai, everything that existed in the physical world was separated from everything in the spiritual world. The two worlds were different. They were not working in harmony. At Mount Sinai, God changed that whole system, that the physical and the spiritual can be fused together. You can take a physical object, take, let's say, a mezuzah, and you make it holy. It has a different status. It's no longer just a piece of parchment with ink on it. It becomes a holy object. And not only does it affect objects, it affects the person himself or herself. Every time we do a mitzvah, it fuses our cells, our bodies, with godly energy. And that's why once the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, once these 10 statements were given at Mount Sinai, we have no choice except to go against ourselves. Now, I just want to go into the whole first commandment. The first statement, rather, is I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Is that a commandment or a statement? It's a statement. It doesn't say, I want you to do this or that. Maimonides says it is a commandment. Nachmanides challenges Maimonides and he says, how could it be a commandment? Because if you command someone, you already accept the fact that there is a commander. So if you are commanded to believe in God, if that's what it is, which is what Maimonides says it is, you already believe in God before being told to believe in God. Because how could you tell someone, God commands you to believe in him? If you don't believe, you don't accept the commandment. If you do believe, you don't need the commandment. So how could you call that a commandment? So the great Jewish philosopher Abarbanel explains that the commandment is not to believe in God. You don't need a commandment to believe in God. And that's the most logical thing that everyone who has a brain will realize, that the world can't come about on its own. It had to have been created. So you don't need a commandment to believe in God. Neither could you command someone to believe. If they believe, they believe. If they don't believe, they're not going to accept the commandment. But rather, it means that the God that you already believe in, you should know is an absolute existence. He has to exist by definition. Nothing else has to exist. We could imagine a universe that disappears, that doesn't exist. You can't imagine God not existing. He's an absolute existence. In Hasidic thought, it goes even deeper than that. God is beyond the concept of existence. Not only is he not the same kind of existence of everything else, he's beyond anything that we attribute to existence. But I'm not going to go into that right now. That deserves a full class in and of itself. Then there's another level of understanding. Maimonides, in his Book of Commandments, and this is translated from Arabic, so it may not be 100% precise, says that the mitzvah is to believe in God. In his Mishnah Torah, which he wrote in Hebrew, he doesn't use the word believe, he uses the word know. That it's not a mitzvah to believe in God. Again, you can say either you believe or you don't believe. But it's a mitzvah to probe that belief, to apply your mind to it, know it, not just believe in it. And you know as much as you can know, and beyond that, you have to believe that God is beyond anything that you can know. Then there's another opinion that says, this is from a 13th century, 12th, 13th century rabbi, known as the Smak. That's the name of his book. That's the name of the acronym for the book. But he says that this commandment, this statement is actually a commandment. I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, means that you have to believe that just like God took us out of Egypt, he's freed us from slavery, so too will God redeem us from this exile as well. That means the commandment here is to not believe in God, but to believe that God is a redeemer. That just as he redeemed us in the past, he will redeem us in the future. So that is the commandment. Now, based on the point that I made before, that 10 statements means that you're declaring the fact. This is the way it is. I'd like to retranslate the first statement. Instead of just saying, I am God, your God, who is taking you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, it'll translate, take the word Anochi. Anochi translate as I. But in Hebrew, there's another word for I. What's the other word for I in Hebrew? Ani. Anochi means the I who I am, who transcends naming. There's an aspect of God, God's essence, that transcends being able to give him a name. The next word, which is the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God, the Yud and the Hey, and the Vav and the Hey, that refers to God's transcendent, infinite light, because it has the three tenses in it. That name of God has the word Iyar, was, Hoveh, is, Iyar, will be, all consolidated in one word. What does that mean? That aspect of God is the light of God that transcends all parameters, transcends time and space. Time and space go together. So we're addressing God as God's essence, and then we're talking about God's infinite existence. And the third one, your God, actually could be translated as your power. God is saying that my essence, and my infinite existence has now become your power, has now become internalized within you. It's no longer outside of you, and you're distinct. It has become a part of you. It has become part of a very consciousness. This is what the first statement is. It's not a commandment. We don't have to look at it as a commandment. We're looking at it as a statement of fact, that you should know that God is our reality. He is who we are. He has become one with us. And on page 5, I give another retranslation. My essence and transcendence will permeate your consciousness, liberate you from all constraints. And this brings us to the idea that this introduces us to the real concept of freedom. What this statement is saying, God is telling the people, you want to be free? You have the ability to be free because I have made myself part of you. And when you reveal that connection to me, you will be free. Through the mitzvot. Through the mitzvot, yes. Only then can we experience true freedom. When we're suffused, when we're inspired and with the essence of God becoming part of our consciousness. Because I want to explain what freedom is. We have such a misunderstanding. Everyone talks about how great it is that we have freedom in this country, but people don't realize what the true definition of freedom is. Most people would say freedom is when you can do whatever you want to do. Well, what about the child that runs into the street to catch a ball and runs into the traffic? That's what the child wants to do. How do I know the child wants to do it? Because the child is doing it. One kid once came to his mother and says, Johnny wanted to hit me. So she said, how do you know he wanted to hit you? He said, because he did. So true freedom is not what you want to do, because the child doesn't really know what he or she wants to do. The child doesn't have the understanding that what he thinks he wants to do is contradiction to his very life and existence. That's true with adults as well. What we want to do is not necessarily what we really want to do, because who are we really? We are that energy of God that implanted himself in every one of us. And God gave us that, what people call this conscience. But what is conscience? Why should a person have a conscience? Because the person has the divine within him or her. And because of that, that's really what you want to do. So if a person says, I want to do something, the question has to be asked, is this what I really want to do? Is this what my essence is all about? Or is it something that my imposed personality, my animalistic tendencies that can cover up my true desires? Maybe that's what is encouraging me to do this. That's not really my true will. My true will is only when we're in touch with our essence, with our inner core. And if we can't feel our true potential, if we don't feel that godly energy in us, then we're not free.
There's a saying in the tradition, the freedom of no choice.
That's true. Because if you choose to do the wrong thing, that's contrary to what you really want. So how come we're not free? Because we have allowed, that's what exile is all about. We've allowed the inner true will of the person to be occluded, to be covered up. And we don't feel our inner essence. If we feel it, we would never entertain doing anything that was immoral or unethical or illegal. It would just be impossible. But it's covered up. And when it's covered up, we can do all sorts of terrible things. When the Jews were in the desert, they did some terrible things. 40 days later, they worshipped a golden calf. A little while later, they rebelled against God and Moses. They didn't want to go to Israel. But the women did not participate in those rebellions. Why is that? So the Rabbi once explained, because the women do not have the same cover that men have. Men have more of an obstructive nature. It doesn't allow them to be in touch with their inner essence. A woman and a man have the same inner essence. There's no difference. The difference is and the obstacles that cover it up. In the Messianic age, those obstacles will be removed, and men will finally become tamed. Yes, yes, but that's for another class. We believe that the ultimate redemption will take place under the direction of a Jewish leader, which we'll refer to as Mashiach. Why is he the one to do it? Because he is the one who's mostly in touch with his inner essence. To the extent that we're all different, how we relate to our inner essence, Mashiach is the one who has finally reached that core and allows that core to define his life in a complete way. So he's the one who's capable of ushering in the period of redemption. Now we go to the second statement. Do not have the gods of others in my presence. Some people translate, do not have other gods in my presence. But Rashi says that couldn't be the translation because there are no other gods. That's a false statement. But it's gods of others, or gods that act towards its worshippers as strangers, as others. But what this means is that when you are in God's presence, you can't worship other gods. For idolatry to exist, you can't be aware of God's presence. Otherwise, they would not worship the other gods. They would worship God. And that's why in the Messianic age, when we will all be in God's presence, idolatry will disappear. All forms of idolatry, including the subtle forms of idolatry. And this is the way I would retranslate the second statement. Instead of do not have the gods of others in my presence, you will not have the gods of others because you will all be in my presence. A slight change of translation. We will no longer have the ability to worship other gods because we'll always be in his presence. Or more precisely, you will have no other controlling influences in your life because you will all be in my presence. One of the recurrent prophecies, biblical prophecies, is that a time will come, Messianic age, when all the idols will be eliminated. Does that mean that we're going to go around smashing everyone's idols? We won't have to, because no one will worship them anymore. They'll be worthless. They'll be meaningless. People will get rid of them on their own. There will be no struggle to fight idolatry because idolatry will, as a matter of course, cease to exist. We'll know. Will be no external forces to pressure us to go against our inner selves. And that will eliminate the modern forms of idolatry. What are the modern forms? Money, fame, influence, power, things that people worship no less so than people who worship statues in the past. And that's what subtle forms of idolatry entail. And this is where we come to recognize that this commandment also is the solution to depression. The first statement deals with experiencing a freedom. How do you experience freedom? When you recognize what your true inner self wants. When you live your life in accordance with your inner self. By getting rid of all these idols, this is what takes away depression. How so? In the Messianic age, we won't have depression. That will be cured. All illnesses will be cured. So people will say, well, that's going to be a miracle. No, it won't be a miracle. It'll becomes a matter of course, because once we get rid of all the idols, because we're in God's presence, we won't have the need for depression. There's a cute story of the second Chabad Rebbe, known as the middle Rebbe, was a child, very young child, and he enters the synagogue and he sees some venerable rabbis talking, and he sees one of them looking depressed. So he says, "Why are you depressed?" They said, "Because I'm a business person and my business is not going well. The economic situation is very bad." So the Middle Rebbe, as a child, says to them, "Your problem is," and he quoted the Psalm 146, which reads, "Why should a nation say, 'Where now is their God?' Indeed, our God is in heaven. Whatever he desires, he does. Their idols are of silver and gold, the product of human hands." Now, the word for idols in Hebrew is also the word for depression. Atzabehem is the biblical word for their idols, and atzavut is the word for depression, the same root, the same word. What's the connection? The connection is that if you have idols such as gold and silver, if those are your idols, that's what you worship, gold and silver, then that will cause depression because you're worshiping your own human hands. You think that your life depends on how hard you're going to work, and it's based on your endeavor, your initiative, and God has nothing to do with it. So depression really comes from now there could be chemical reasons for depression, and we're not talking about that. But even chemical reasons for depression are aggravated by the spiritual sources of depression. What's the spiritual source of depression? When a person has a distorted view of life. If we knew the underlying positivity in our lives, we wouldn't get depressed. If we know deep down that the positive energy that we have, if we knew that we're not God, and that everything that happens is not our handiwork. Yes, it is our handiwork, but it's only successful because God endows it with success. If we only recognize that, we wouldn't be depressed. And it's interesting that children are naturally happy. So why is it that when we mature, we lose things that we had when we were children? We become naturally unhappy. There's a negativity bias in our lives. Yet children are happy. Why? And society spends billions of dollars for drugs, entertainment, which is also a drug, and everything that we can find that will help us distract us from reality until the next fix. We're all drug addicts. That's what modern society has done to us. We've turned normal people into drug addicts. So the drug could be physically destructive, or it could be emotionally destructive, or it could be a way of distracting ourselves, but it doesn't treat the illness. It treats the symptoms, not the cause of the illness. Because where does depression come from? It comes from a misalignment between our souls and bodies. When we're not in touch with our souls, our bodies, left to their own devices, send negative signals to our conscious minds. So when we cover up our inner self, when we're no longer feeling that we're in God's presence, and it's just the bodily urges, the bodily needs that control us, it's naturally going to be depressing. Because the body, how was Adam named? What was he named? Adam. Why was he named Adam, I should say? What does the word Adam mean? It came from Adamah, from the earth. That's the body. His soul was blown into him by God blowing it into him. Unlike the animals that were created body and soul together, Adam was created body and then soul. And there's another verse that it explains why Adam was called Adam, because there's a biblical phrase, Adam el Elyon, I'm like the one above. So his body is Adamah, is earth. Earth is inert. It stays on the ground. It's very, very low. And the soul is high up, and it soars to the heavens. And we're a fusion of the two. So if you allow the body to control and cover up the nature of the soul, which was programmed at Sinai, what happens then is that you're naturally going to be depressed. It's only normal to be depressed. The psychiatrist shouldn't consider depression to be an illness. That's norm. That's the norm of society. To be happy is an abnormal, but that's not the truth. That's the way it would seem, because everyone needs to be drugged and not be depressed. Now, there are different degrees of depression, of course, but even the mild forms of depression are based on the fact that we allow our bodies to control our perceptions, to control our agenda. It's a biblical verse that says, Oz v'chedva b'mkomo, in God's place there's always joy. God is the source of joy, because what does joy mean? Joy means that you're open to reality. When you're close to the true reality, then you're limiting yourselves, and you allow yourselves to be reduced to the lowest common denominator. But when the body runs in tandem with the soul, the body will also be infected with joy. And that will happen in the Messianic age. That will get rid of all illness, and that includes depression as well. So each of these statements, as we'll see as we go on this course, each of these statements is geared to treating us emotionally as well. The first statement shows us how to be free. The second statement shows us how to avoid depression, to recognize the source of depression. Now, again, it doesn't mean that a person who is depressed should not seek medical help. And Judaism believes very much in the medical community. The Torah makes it very clear, "V'rapo yirape," and heal, he shall heal. We're allowed to avail ourselves of medicine, because medicine is all.
Thanks for watching. I wasn't feeling well today, so I decided to have a better lecture for myself. Clear? What he was saying? You able to hear it? Loud. My phone's not working well. Okay. Huh?
No.
It goes to over 10.
Right.
But,
I think she's asking.
what?
Right.
It's Heschel. Heschel. Last name is Greenberg.
Oh,
Strel Heschel. He's quite brilliant. He has in his office, he has shelves filled with his own writing, not other people's farm, his own farm. Yeah.
okay.
Ramosha Feinstein, his last SCUMA approval was my brother's book on the Rambam. Actually went, Ramosha Feinstein actually said some great things about him. So he can speak for simple people, he can speak for the crowd, for the secular crowd, and he can also speak for big Hamidah HaChaman. He has a good command of the English language, and he also has he's also good. I'm proud to have a brother like that. I take after my mother, take after his father. Yes.
So when you say that, the power, the sense power has to be a part of us, we become.
Right. So in other words, it's not me going against God, going after itself. I'm praying.
How's that related to it?
Statement. This is a fact. I am. You have to accept me. I am godly. I have become part of you.
So by saying I am, that's the person who is the God to God, that, and part of it. Pull that all together.
Thanks for listening.
Hey, what's the woman with the idol? No, what's the one I tell you?
Oh, I know. Atzabeh means idol. But Atzavut also means sadness, depression.
And I did that before because.
Yeah, but not all depression. It's not talking about clinical depression. It's talking about people that are, down on themselves. With clinical depression, you have to see a psychiatrist with the story. That you're not don't go to a psychiatrist, just hear a lecture, you'll be okay. No.
Thank you. That's accurate. Hello, Jess. Hello. Hi. Thank you. I'm fine. Thank you very much.